the distance seems to have no effect at all, which would again suggest we're dealing with a quantum phenomena. The healer was in Vancouver, British Columbia. I was in Florida, the longest distance across the United States. I've continued then to experiment with different healing modes for different things with different people. But the mechanism is always the same. There's information being transferred, and there seems to be an energy transfer as well that's palpable.
It now appears that our bodies are connected to the field, but what is the mechanism for this intercommunication? How can this connection take place? One possible solution, the biophoton. Biophotons are weak emissions of light emanating from the cells of all living things.
We know we're sending out information with biophoton emissions because people like Fritz Popp have discovered that we are sending out tiny currents of light.
We started to look for these photons. I knew from the beginning on that it must not be very high intensity, but it was clear that one should have these photons at all in a cell.
In order to detect the biophotons, Professor Popp and his students needed a photomultiplier that was so sensitive it could see a candle over 12 miles away. When a living organism is placed in front of the photon detector, light emitting from the cells can be observed.
We started with cucumber seedlings and later with other ones, and all living systems which we put into the instrument showed this very weak photon emission.
Professor Popp theorizes that these biophoton emissions may be controlling our body's metabolism.
Molecules cannot regulate themselves. They have to have a field, more or less. So the photons should be the carrier of the information which is necessary to regulate the metabolism.
These biophotons create a dynamic, coherent web of light within our bodies. Our bodies are constantly emitting light in the form of biophotons. Are these biophotons the body's control mechanism? Isn't that the function of our DNA, our genes?
Genes are not controlling our biology. When we get issues running in families, for example, cancer, we immediately look at a genealogy chart and mark all the recipients of this cancer running through the family and then turn around and say, look, genetics, this is running in the family, so there must be cancer genes. What they've left out of this very interesting piece of research that reveals that when children are adopted into families that have cancer, the adopted children will express the cancer with the same propensity as any natural child in that family. But the interesting fact is the child comes from totally different genetics that doesn't even have that cancer. So it says being introduced into the family dynamics, which is where you learn perceptions and beliefs and attitudes, is what shapes the cancer, not the genetics that somebody came in with.
There is a new branch of genetics known as epigenetics that addresses this environmental influence on genetic expression.
Epigeneticists have discovered that the information inside every cell, the thing that switches it on and turns it on and changes things, is not inside the cell, but outside. Signals occur outside from the environment.
A gene is a blueprint, that's basically what it is, to make a protein molecule. And the proteins, there are over 100,000 of them, are the building blocks that give us our biology, our structure, our behavior. Okay? So the issue is, we talk about gene blueprints, and up until the last 10 years, a blueprint was a hardwired piece of information to make a particular protein. The new science is just mind-boggling because it reveals that through epigenetic mechanisms, through the influence of the environment on reading the genes, epigenetic mechanisms can produce over 30,000 different variations from every gene blueprint. And all of a sudden, when you start to recognize that, you realize we have potentials that are totally unlimited. And this is a great change from a belief that genes were deterministic. Now genes are potentials.
If you just look at the molecular level, The Human Genome Project has revealed that we have about 25,000 genes, far fewer than they originally expected. The Chimpanzee Genome Project has now sequenced the entire chimpanzee genome, and their genome is virtually the same as ours. They've got the same kinds of proteins, the same kind of genes. You can hardly tell the difference. Yet, there's an obvious difference, and if you can't explain it in terms of genes, what can you explain it in terms of? And the answer is, I think, morphogenetic fields. Just as you can build two different buildings with the same bricks and cement, if you have two different plans, you can build different organisms with different fields, even if the constituent molecules are very similar as they are in humans and chimpanzees.
The DNA is like a library book. These are all the possible proteins from earthworms right up to us. It's all the same library, but you've got to know which book to take out of the library. This is the big problem in genetics itself, is trying to explain how the body knows which book to take out of the genetic library. And we think the body field is what decides which piece of information is taken from the DNA.
Many cultures of the past have explored the energetic system of the body. Today, researchers theorize that the body does have a field of energy, known as the morphogenic field, or the body field.
There's a hierarchy of fields organizing our bodies. There's the field of the whole body, there's the fields of the organs, and then the fields of the tissues, and then the fields of the cells within those. Field of our own body is within and around the body. There's an overall field, and then there's subsidiary fields, sort of modular fields for arms, legs, and the different organs. The advantage of fields is that they're intrinsically holistic. All fields are holistic. The gravitational field is. You can't slice a bit out of it. If you cut a flatworm into 10 different pieces, each part can grow into a new worm. Now, how is that possible? If it was a machine, that wouldn't happen. If you cut up a machine, all you get is a broken machine. But if you cut up a magnet, a field system, then however many little bits of magnet you produce, each has a complete magnetic field. And it was this analogy with magnetic fields that led developmental biologists to suggest the idea of morphogenetic fields in the first place. And this was way back in the 1920s. And this field is now a crucial concept in developmental biology. You can't really understand how organisms develop without it.
All humans begin life as a single cell that grows and divides, developing into the various organs and limbs of our bodies. How these cells know what to become has baffled scientists and led to the idea of control fields in biology.
We've already found that there are different parts of the body field, some of which relate to the muscles and connective tissue. Another part of the body field that relates to the brain and nervous system. Yet another one for the morphic field, which connects back to the DNA and the genetic information of your body. So it links up with medicine in many places, so it's not different from medicine, it's just going a little bit further conceptually.
These energetic fields may provide the information necessary for controlling the body.
How does the body know to maintain its temperature at a particular temperature? What decides, or who decides, what is going to be the correct blood pressure for that person? Nobody knows, and we're saying, as a holistic idea, the body field decides to turn all the knobs.
Morphogenetic fields, or more generally fields of information, yes, are control systems over and above the molecular level or the biochemical level. They're systems that organize the body, they organize the developing organism. Plants have them too, all animals have them. They maintain the form of the body, they help bodies to recover from disease or damage, they underlie regeneration, for example.
We can go even further and could say that the human body actually is structured information, or in other words, that the human body is an energy field. an energy field of standing, stationary scalar waves that are correspondingly organized, structured, and contain a great deal of information.
And I think that we really need a field-based model of the body if we're ever going to be able to integrate different forms of healing or medicine into a coherent understanding.
The body field is an energetic field filled with patterns of information. All of the organs in our bodies generate their own specific fields. One organ in particular seems to generate significant fields which affect the entire body.
The heart is the emperor in the system, the liver, and all the organs have other tasks, but the heart is overruling all.
There's a concept in energy medicine called energy cardiology that says that the signals produced by the heart are all of regulatory importance.
The heart is constantly emitting sound, pressure waves, heat, light, electrical, magnetic, and electromagnetic signals.
All of the cells in the body are receiving these different kinds of signals at different times because they travel at different velocities through the circulatory system.
The heart generates by far the largest rhythmic electromagnetic signal in the body. If you look at this magnetic field as a carrier wave, it's being modulated with information. So it's the carrier wave for information. And the work in our lab has shown quite clearly that it's modulated with emotional patterns. In other words, if we're feeling angry or frustrated, irritated, the information that's being imprinted on that magnetic field is very different than if we're feeling care or love or compassion towards that person.
The heart has been found to have rhythmic beating patterns that can be incoherent or coherent. These patterns are closely linked to our emotions and how we feel.
When the heart's rhythmic beating pattern is smooth and ordered, it's called a coherent rhythm. And that coherent rhythm entrains or synchronizes the brain rhythm, the nervous system, the bodily organs and glands all dance in harmony to that heart coherent rhythm.
Positive emotions, what we tend to call positive, things like love, appreciation, care, forgiveness, gratitude, all lead to a very different kind of heart pattern than negative things, like if we're feeling anger or irritation, anxiety. Those create what are called incoherent rhythms or disordered patterns. On the other hand, we have the positive feelings when we're just appreciating the sunset and how beautiful it is. Our heart's beating out this what we call coherent rhythm. It's a sine wave-like pattern that the heart is sending to the brain.
And we call it heart coherence because in research we find that the heart has to get into this synchronized, coherent, rhythmic pattern of heart rate in order for the rest of the brain and the nervous system and body to entrain and synchronize to that powerful rhythm. So it starts with the heart.
When we feel the pulse, what we're feeling is the pressure wave created by the beating heart. It's not actually the flow of blood, it's the pressure wave. So every time the heart beats, that pressure wave goes to the brain and throughout the body. And if we look at the brain level, that pressure wave synchronizes all the neurons. In fact, the brain would be in trouble if it didn't have that synchronizing signal to kind of give us a global synchronizing effect.
When someone is in coherence, you can often feel their love or their compassion or their gratitude radiating.
Coherence is the optimal physiological state that underlies learning and performance and facilitating the body's natural regenerative process.